All right. This is Sue Frederick's third numerology class, and I'm so excited about this class. We've been having so much fun and so many great questions and discussions. And so I'm going to start with a prayer to pray us in, and then we'll get going for the night. So take a deep breath with me. And another one. And as we shed the worries and the tasks of the day and of the week, and we allow our hearts to open into this expanded place and time where this higher knowledge will come to us in ways that will help us navigate our lives moving forward, understand our relationships with others, even the painful ones, and learn to do work that is more in alignment with what our soul came to do. And so we are assured that every question that needs to be asked will be asked tonight, and every answer that needs to be given will be provided for us from Spirit. And we are grateful for that. And so it is. So I was going to start with question and answer tonight, and then we'll get to the pinnacles because we didn't quite, or maybe I should do pinnacles first, and then we'll do question and answer. So let me open my workbook here. So we're at the pinnacle page of your workbook. And when we were talking about pinnacles last week, just to review it with you, during your life, everybody experiences 4 pinnacle cycles. And you can think of it as 4 times in your life when you'll be kind of learning different lessons or soul lessons. And it's not especially meaning that doesn't mean it will be challenges. It means, for example, that this will be an area that your soul will be focusing on and possibly excelling in, but it will definitely be the focus of your longing, the focus of your intention during that period of your life. And if we go to this page, excuse me, there's a specific mathematical way to calculate these pinnacles. And here's the page that was missing last week. And it shows you that for your first pinnacle number, you add your month of birth to your date of birth. And that gives you the energy vibration of the first lesson that you'll be learning. And if your birth path, so if we just go down this column right here and pick your birth path, which we already know from adding your birth date together, and then you can look at your first pinnacle. And in your case, for example, if you're on a 3 path, your first pinnacle goes from birth until the age of 33. And so what was the lesson you were focusing on? And in my case, well, I would have to look at the 4 because I'm on the 22-4 birth path. So my first pinnacle went from birth to 32. And my first pinnacle lesson was the number 6. And 6 is all about love and receiving love, giving love, caring about the community, the world at large, and sometimes losing ourselves in others when we love them. So when I look back at my life between the ages of birth and 35, I can say, oh yeah, I was seeking love, and I was also losing myself in relationships that weren't especially healthy for me. And I was very interested in community. In fact, during my 20s, I first lived on an organic farm commune before that was a thing in the 70s. We had 200 acres of land, and we were building home structures that were sustainable, and it was a big community of us. And then after that, I taught for Outward Bound, Colorado Outward Bound, and that was really a community of teachers we would just kind of, some of us were living in the back of our cars in between courses, and then we'd go out up in the mountains and lead these big groups. So it was all about processing the group to overcome fears. And then Paul died, and so I lost a year of my life caring and totally focused on him, to the point where when he died, I was kind of lost. I didn't, many of you are caregivers. You know what happens when you put every minute of your life into caring for someone who's sick and dying. When they cross over, you sort of go, oh, well, wait a minute, who am I now? And that was definitely the question on the table for me. And it's interesting that the first pinnacle goes to 32 for me in my 4 path, because that's about the time when I decided, okay, well, I've got to start really working on my professional writing career, and enrolled in graduate school in writing, journalism, and creative writing, and really got to work. And then my next pinnacle started, and it lasted between the age of 32 and 41. And so you add, to find out your next pinnacle lesson, you add your day of birth and your year of birth. And for me, that's turns out to be the 22-4 was my second pinnacle lesson. And it's so interesting because during that time, for me, that's when my writing career took off, and I was writing for big newspapers and magazines, and then became executive editor of 2 different magazines. So my career was flourishing, and I did believe I was making a difference because I was writing about health and natural health and all of that good stuff. So you can really see the patterns here, even if you don't know those are the pinnacle cycles you've been under, and you look at this and it helps you realize, wow, I didn't do anything wrong by choosing a certain career that might not have lasted forever, but I was perhaps learning exactly what I needed to learn at that time. So any questions about these pinnacles? Just don't raise your hand. I can't see you. Just just speak up, unmute.
Sue?
Yes.
When you talk about the numbers for the pinnacle, or maybe they carry the same vibration, but are we looking at the numbers as it would appear in a personal year, or the numbers as in the birth path, like when I look at Divine Lens in the back?
Well, those are all the same. In other words, if you're on a 9 birth path for your whole life, then the lessons are about surrender, stepping into your wisdom, not looking back and being disappointed or bitter, and instead looking to spirit for the meaning and purpose of life, surrendering what you need to let go of. That's the birth path 9, making a difference for the world. And then you make it into a personal year. It has the same vibration. And then you make it into a pinnacle vibration. You're probably in that phase, if that's a long phase for you, whatever pinnacle it is. If you're under the 9, it means that you will be doing something that has to do with making the world a better place. You will really master the energy of surrender, because you'll be under that pinnacle for a long time. And you'll also really step into your higher wisdom, because you can't live under the pinnacle number 9 and not be looking at that bigger picture of the vibration of final lifetime energy, just putting all the lessons together, stepping into grace, stepping into wisdom, stepping into surrender. 9 is sort of like the death of the ego. And I love that idea of it, because it's no longer about making things happen and using your ego to force things to happen. It's really about surrendering to what wants to happen for highest good. And that's a true wisdom approach. And that is the vibration of the 9. Does that answer it for you?
It's like your books, and each one of the books, the numbers, I love it, but it's like I'm trying to figure out how to put it all together, because when you need bridges to heaven, it's all about grief and the numbers and how it interrelates. And then you've got the soul agreement book, so that has this, and so it's trying to we need 40 years worth of your wisdom in one book that just puts it all together. Because when I looked at what was in the divine lens for the pinnacle years, the numbers for me, it was like, are you kidding me? It was so, especially the one right now that I'm in from 52 on.
Which one is that? Will you share?
8.
Oh, that's perfect for you. It's about owning your
Yeah.
power, right?
If there's any strength length to do it, that's the thing.
Oh, Mary Ellen, of course there is. And it doesn't mean you have to go out and start a business, but it means
No,
that,
I know.
in every challenge that comes your way, you own your power. And certainly in the past year, all the life changes you've made, to empower yourself have been exactly right on for this pinnacle that you're working with.
Okay, so I'll be nice. I'm gonna mute myself because I'm not yeah.
All right, more questions.
Okay, I'll ask mine too.
Okay.
Mercy. So I know you touched on this, but I just needed more clarity. And that is when I figure my birth date, one of the ways comes out the 25/7, but two come out 16/7. I've always referred to myself as a 25/7. So does a 16/7 have more weight if you're looking into the two numbers?
So I think that's a great question. And the way I would look at it is the numbers that show up twice, I would give more weight to. So in that case, it would be the 16/7, right? And here's how I read this too. And this is different probably from how you would read it in other books. But if you're a 16/7, what the numbers say to me about that is that number one, you're still in the journey of learning to believe in yourself and become that powerful leader that you're capable of, and that opening your heart is the solution to it. And it all culminates in your vibration of the 7, which is about asking why and studying spiritual learning in order to really understand our true nature as divine beings. That's how I would make a sentence out of your 16/7 birth path.
Okay. And that sums it up pretty well. And then my other question is, because I'm a 7, I have had a lot of 28 ones in my life, or just ones in general, other ones. So other ones. So that makes that combined relationship 8. So
that's right.
What does that?
So let me ask you, are those relationships mostly loving and happy?
Not all of them. No, I would say for the most part, they have been more challenging.
Okay. So, the soul agreement number 8 means that you are battling for power, that when you hit the right balance of energy, then you'll both be empowering each other. But for example, if you're employed and you and your boss or your manager, you have an 8 soul agreement number, it means that you're going to be butting heads until you work out and figure out how to work together in a way that doesn't threaten your manager, and that your manager doesn't make you feel kind of overpowered by her. So that's how you work out an 8 soul agreement number.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because both my parents were 1. My ex-husband was a 1.
Oh boy, you've been learning that lesson since you were a child, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And what I find interesting, when I did those pinnacle years from the age of 29 to 47, 2 of those were an 8.
This is so good, Marcy, because it really means that even though you're on the 7 path, your soul really is trying to learn to be more powerful in this lifetime. And so, having this powerful soul agreement with your parents and then with your husband, you know, it's all about standing on your own, the 16-7, you know, believing in yourself, opening your heart, and then totally merging yourself with that 7 spiritual vibration, no matter what anyone around you tells you you should or should do or should be.
Very good. I'm just having so much fun with all of this. It's great.
Oh,
Thank
that's
you
so good.
much.
Anybody else have a question? Well, I'm going to ask Mary Ellen's question that she emailed me because it's such a good one. She said, my question for class is there any connection to 9 personal years as exit points in a soul's journey? And I love that question because you're really thinking, and I used to really ask a lot of questions like that when I was learning, and I've gone back and studied. I can't even tell you how many times I've thought, oh, I think I found a pattern for understanding when someone might have exit points, and then of course I work it out and it doesn't work. It's not true. And so I think we're all trying to figure out if there's a pattern that we can use to decide when our exit points are. But there is something interesting about the number 6 and the number 9 together, because if you even look at those two numbers, they're kind of the flipped version of each other. Because what I have seen in my clients and in myself is when we are in a 6 personal year, that is 90% of the time when we lose a loved one, especially if it has to do with a partner, and especially if it has to do with caring for them. And I can even look at, it's really interesting when you look at someone's relationship and you see that they're in a 6 personal year and their other partner is in their partner is in a 9 personal year. I can always say to them, you know, this is the year that you either divorce or you heal the relationship. And 90% of the time they say, no, we're going to divorce. It's too far gone, because those two numbers have a similar vibration. And it's about surrender of the heart and surrendering to someone else's needs. And if you even look at children's, like a lot of time I'll be doing a whole family configuration of charts, you know, and looking at somebody's children, and I'll go and see, oh, wait, the mom is in a 6 personal year, the kid is in a 9 personal year, the husband is in a 9, and suddenly you just get this gestalt where, you know, oh my gosh, that family is really in a choice point of healing or divorce. And it is so accurate, it's scary. But the good thing about knowing about that is that when you come up on a 6 personal year and you look at what your partner's in, and let's pretend your partner's in a 9 personal year, it doesn't have to be divorce, but it means you have to put attention to healing the relationship. And then if that person is sick, you know, the 6 personal year may be exactly when you become a caregiver and exactly when you surrender that soul to the divine.
So I have a question about that, Sue. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. So my son Kevin was in his 6 personal year when he passed away. And you had told me back then that it was actually, that year was my closing cycle, like the 9th year of my cycle. And
wow, I forgot about that.
Well, at the time, I didn't realize that Kevin was in his 6th year. So that's exactly the question, kind of what you were saying. But my question was, like, if it was my 9th year where things are coming to an end and, like, you know, sort of wrapping it up and start over, okay, it kind of made sense. But if he was in his 6th year, he hadn't really even completed that cycle, the 9 years, right? So,
but you see, the soul doesn't have to complete a 9-year cycle. It simply means that when he was in that 6th year, his heart was very open and his heart was learning and feeling what he needed to feel to culminate his lessons for this lifetime and crossover.
I see. I see. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, beautiful Hilda. I love you, sweetie.
Thank you. Thank you. Love you too.
I have a question for you. Oops.
Go ahead, Elaine.
Does a year 69, can those numbers correspond to major things happening?
You mean 1969?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. That was a significant year in my life growing up. The year I left home and was disowned. So yeah, there's a lot of vibration of love and surrender and all that stuff going on. Did you have a powerful year in 1969?
Sure did. My sister died and my daughter was born.
Wow.
All in the same year.
Incredible.
Yep. So just wonder, when you started saying 6 and 9, I'm going back and looking,
Yeah.
oh my gosh,
I think now that we talk about it, I think I was 69 when we had to sell our house and move to Arizona because Jean was diagnosed with cancer. And I hadn't even thought about that until now. Yes, that I was the age of 69. So it's so interesting how those two numbers, 6 and 9, especially when they're together, they signal for us that there's a big heart opening reinvention point happening.
Wait, so technically, Sue, I'm sorry, I have another question real quick.
Yeah.
So technically, when you said the 6 and the 9, right?
Mhm.
So if Kevin was in his 6th year and I was in my 9th year, does that have a significance like that? Because you just said it's a year for transformation. Obviously, it wasn't the year 69, but if it was his,
yes,
like, can
of
you
course
use
it
numbers
does.
like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
whenever those two numbers line up like that. But Hilda, what I don't want you thinking is that, there was something you could have done to stop it if you'd known about it. No, that's not the point of the numbers. So I just want to make sure you don't carry that in your heart. And just know that it was the universe now showing you, hey, you did nothing wrong. Kevin did nothing wrong. This was just always planned as a powerful moment in your soul journey.
Right. Yep. I get it. Thank you.
Thank you. These are such good questions, you all. Thank you so much.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I have a 6 personal year, and the way I figure it, Dale's is a 7 personal year. So then I add those together and that comes up to a 4. Are we a 4 together?
No, the personal year, you don't add those two together like that.
No.
But I mean, unless you feel that you get something valuable out of that, what I've learned is that it's just more of an awareness. So for example, when Jean and the way that your personal years line up will always be the same with that other person, because you're on different paths, you're at different ages, and that doesn't change. So what you can learn from that's so interesting is, for example, when my husband and my daughter, they go through, even though they're in different birth paths and different ages, they go through their personal year cycles at the same time. They're always in the same number vibration. And so I get this double whammy of drama whenever they're both in a 9 personal year. And and it's so funny because before, when I wasn't even paying attention to numbers, a long time ago when the kids were young, I remember Sarah just having a horrible year in school, with friends, feeling that she was being left out and everything, and Jean feeling like his business was falling apart, and I had to keep reminding myself, no, they're going to be okay. They're just both going through 9-year transitions, and they'll get through it, and something better will come along. And that's the benefit of numbers, is if you don't know about personal year cycles and suddenly your partner and your child are both telling you their lives are falling apart, you'll just carry that as a heavy burden going, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do to help them or save them, and this is terrible. But when we look at it as a 9-year cycle, we go, they're in that year of surrender. How can I counsel them in a way that helps them understand that it will all be different in a year from now? You'll have a new direction. You'll feel better. What you need to do now in this 9 years is to surrender and trust. And that is such a helpful way to counsel your family members when they're in a 9 personal year.
Oh, I had this other question. If I'm a 6 personal year and he's a 7 personal year, does
Mhm.
that mean that this year I'm going to be the caregiver and I could
Well,
possibly?
Marietta, I don't know your story. I don't know about your husband, but is he sick?
I think he is.
Mm,
I think he is. I think he has some problems that I think are going to be challenging. I'm going to have him tested
right.
the end of this month, but I think he has some mental
Yeah.
issues that he's going through that. Does this 6 mean that this is going to be a rough year for me? Because
Now,
I'm
you
going to
see,
be,
I'm not going to let you go there, Miss Marietta, because there are no bad numbers and there are no good numbers. It may mean that you will have to put caregiving as a priority this year. And
darn.
darn, she says.
Party girl doesn't want to hear that,
I know.
but I think that's where it's going to go. I really do. And I'm ready for it.
Yeah, and your intuition is strong, you know. I mean, honestly, I knew that Gene had cancer while he was still dragging his feet about getting the biopsy, you know. And that's the worst part about being intuitive, is that we know what's coming, and yet, you know, we can't say that. Like, I didn't want to say, Gene, I do think you have cancer, go get a biopsy, because that would have just put him into his dark night, you know, of the soul. So I let him work it out with his doctor. But when the diagnosis came, you know, I felt like my heart was kind of prepared for it because of my intuition.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it's possible, but if it is, if you could boil each number into one word
Mm-hmm. Oh, that
for
sounds
us,
fun. Let me go do that. I'm going to bring us back to the number pages. That sounds like a very fun exercise. So let me get to those numbers. Page 12. Okay.
10.
So remember that every number kind of has 2 meanings. So I'm going to boil each number into 2 words. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So the positive meaning of 1, I would say independent or visionary. See, I can't even do it in 1. And the negative challenge of the 1 is self-doubt. The positive of the 2 is intuition, definitely. The negative is focusing on details, being really good with details, because you're too sensitive to face the higher vibration of the intuition. You don't want to feel everything. The vibration of the number 3, self-expressive, creative. Oh, I'm going more than 1, sorry. And the negative of 3 is it's definitely cold-hearted, because you're in your head a lot on the 3 path unless you evolve and learn and grow. And then you use your beautiful heart to be self-expressive and creative on the positive side. Go ahead.
So what I'm thinking, what my question or hope is that, like, the one word we could apply it in every situation.
You mean like personal year, birth path, pinnacle?
Like you say, each number has a vibration that's always the same. You just apply it to those.
Right.
So, like, is there?
So
I don't know if it's possible.
Okay,
but
well, let me explain it. The number 1, if you're on the 1 path, you intend to be a visionary, and yet you may have to deal with self-doubt. And when you hit a 1 personal year, you will be starting a new cycle, but because it's also your birth path number, you'll have great energy around new beginnings, and you'll be able to launch some new directions that will help you a lot. And then if you're under a 1 pentacle, it means that you're learning to believe in yourself during that phase of your life. And if you address the lessons, you can be a visionary in that phase of your life. And to add the 1 to the soul agreements, if it's a 1 soul agreement, it means your relationship will always have a little space between you and your partner, or that person you have that soul agreement with. You will both be independent. You will travel parallel lives more than merging with each other. That's the 1 soul agreement. So
Okay.
does that answer that?
Yeah. So you just kind of pick from those 3 or 4 with the feeling of that. And
Yeah, and
because
also
you use
Carrie,
those
the
words.
more, the more you work with the numbers, the more it just becomes the way you think about them. Like you meet somebody and you find out they're in a 3 personal year, and you instantly start thinking, oh yeah, it's the year where they're being social and creative, and it's kind of fun. It's not a very hard working year. And yet they need to work on opening their heart in that year and getting out of their head. And then you find out somebody's a 3 birth path, and it's kind of the same words, just put into a different sentence.
Okay. That's very helpful.
That was awesome. Can you do that with each number?
Mary Ellen, you are a taskmaster, girl. I'll do it. Yeah.
It was
All right.
beautiful. That was
Okay.
exactly.
So we did number 1, and now
Yep.
did I do 2 for
What was
everything?
the negative for 2? What was the negative for 2?
Obsession. So for example, if you're on a 2 birth path, you might just want to organize details in your career, and you'll be really good at it, but you'll have a higher calling to intuition if you're ready, when you're ready to do that. And if you're in a 2 personal year, it's about relationship, connecting to others. 2 is a little tricky as I think about it, because if you're on a 2 birth path, it doesn't mean especially that you want to be in a relationship all the time, but it can be a negative part of your journey, is that you're too easily merged with a partner, because 2 is such an intuitive, sensitive energy. And then if you're under a 2 pentacle, well, that's going to be all about learning about using your intuition and learning about relationships. And if you're in a 2 personal year, people are coming into your life to partner with you and help you feel that you're not alone in your journey. And if you run a business or own a business, it'll be a year of maybe bringing on some people to help you with your work and making friends. And if you're under a 2, I think I've covered them all. So 3, I think we've covered the 3.
Soul agreement for 2.
Soul agreement for 2. Oh, that's a great soul agreement, because it's about connection, about intuition. Except you want to make sure that you don't get focused on the details of an orderly house instead of your intuitive connection with your partner. And if we go to 4, 4, just one word for the number 4 is strength. And that's what it can really boil down to. I was working with a client today, and she's a 4, and I was listening to her life story, and oh my gosh, 4s just know how to keep going, and they build this strength, and they build incredible work, and they're physically strong usually. So it's just think of the number 4 as being strong. Now, of course, that can be bad if you're too strong and you're, stubborn and overly determined. But the other thing about 4 is the negative side is you can get just lost in work, and you think work is the only thing important in life. But then a 4 relationship means that it's strong, it's enduring, but it will take work, usually around communication. If you have a 4 soul agreement, you have to work on communication, but when you do, it's an enduring relationship. If you're under the pinnacle of 4, then your career will be very important then. And you will be probably doing some of the most important work of your life under that pinnacle. If you're in a 4 personal year, you will feel like, oh my gosh. In fact, I'm in a 4 personal year this year, and it's been amazing to watch all the opportunities and projects coming my way that I've wanted to happen for a long time. And suddenly they're putting it on my plate, and I'm just going, yes, I can do that. I can do that. I mean, one of the great things I haven't told you guys is that maybe you know about humanitiesteam.org. It's a big nonprofit organization that brings people like Neil Donald Walsh and Suzanne Giesman to teach classes on this big website. And you can go and sign up for like $39 a month or something. Well, they came to me and said, we want you to teach. So I just finished putting together this 5-part class for them, and it's online learning. So I just had to create it all and record it and make the workbooks and send it off to them. And hopefully it'll be up on their site in a month or so. So that's an example of the 4 personal year. It's like, you got to work hard, but it's building a foundation for your future. So the 5, I love the vibration of the 5. If I'm ever checking into a hotel or something, this is crazy, but this is how I think. And I realize that my room number is a 5. I just take a deep breath and I go, this is going to be fun. I'm going to have fun in this adventure that I'm on, because 5 is about freedom and adventure and passion and change. And some people don't like that, but in my life, that is a great and welcome change of pace from work. So I love the vibration of the 5. And of course, the negative of 5 is you get carried away with with fun and adventure, and you can have addictions and stuff. If you're in a 5 soul agreement, you're going to have a passionate relationship with that person, man, but you're always going to be rubbing each other like sandpaper to grow and change. Like, it's not a relationship where you can just sit by the fire for the rest of your life and drink coffee and be happy and never grow or change. So it will always be pushing you to change. And if you're under a 5 pentacle, wow, that's going to be a time in your life where you have lots of relationships, lots of passion, lots of travel, adventure, but you will also have to watch out for addictions. If you're on a 5 birth path, you will be extraordinarily beautiful and charismatic. Everyone will like you, love you, be drawn to you. And that's on purpose, because you're supposed to use that energy to use it to make a difference. I'm sure I've told you guys, but my favorite example of a 5 path is Elizabeth Boisson, who started Helping Parents Heal. She looks like a movie star. She walks into a room and everyone turns their head to look at her. And you hear her talk, her whole life is devoted towards her nonprofit, Helping Parents Heal, parents who've lost a child. And she's the perfect person for it, because her charisma makes it so that she can go up to a mainstream anybody and say, our children are still with us and they're trying to communicate with us. And that person will be so blown away by her 5 path charisma that they'll go, okay. And they'll believe it. So that's what 5 is about. A 6 is very different. Think of it as like a beautiful, calming, loving, heartfelt vibration. And it's always also, the 6 is about thinking of other people. So a lot of politicians are on a 6 path. Jesus Christ, they believe, was on a 33-6 path. Again, that idea of the whole world's good is what they're focused on. And if they're unevolved or not living on the high end of that 6, it can be giving too much love to other people and losing yourself, losing your own identity, so to speak. This happens to a lot of women, especially moms, if they have to give up their career, to raise children and be a wife, and then they suddenly come up for air and the kids are gone and maybe their marriage is falling apart, and they have to really recenter and remember who they are and go through that process. That's very much a 6 vibration. And if you're under a 6 pinnacle, like I was in the early phase of my life, and especially if you're young, you're going to be looking for love. You're going to think, you're going to feel like love is the most important thing in the world. But that's because you're learning from that. That's why your soul is obsessed with it. And also, if you're under, let's see, we've done pinnacle, personal year of 6, we've talked about that. It can mean having to care for others. And then the 7, I love the vibration of the 7. Think of a quiet, meditative space. That is very 7. And it's all about being focused on the spiritual meaning of things. But if you can also be a little too much intellectual about it sometimes and get out of your heart. And so you might have to be reminded to open your heart if you're involved with the 7 energy or the 7 path. But a negative 7, like I've had some clients and friends actually who were 7 paths who, because of their own personal pain and wounds early on in the life, had really become cynical and shut off any belief in anything spiritual. And if you meet them, any of those people on the 7 path, you will be amazed at their skepticism and their cynicism. But you know that beneath all that is a highly evolved soul who wants to believe in something and has been sort of wounded by the world. And so they're acting very cynical. One of my best friends in the world, I've had him as a best friend since the 70s, is a mountain climbing guy named Fred. He's such an old curmudgeon, and he's been an old curmudgeon since he was in his 20s. And he makes snarky, cynical remarks about everything. And yet he's a 7 path. And so when you see his eyes, he's got the most beautiful, bright, sensitive eyes. And you finally get to know him and you realize this is the most sensitive man on earth. And he probably grew up in New Jersey, and he was around a lot of tough people, and he worked in the shipping industry, and he had to learn to be really cynical or not get bullied. And so that's why he's on the cynical part of it. But it's so fun when you understand people this way. You can really look beyond the surface and see it in a deeper way. Now, the 8 number is about owning power. It's about empowering yourself and others and not abusing your power. If you're in a soul agreement of the number 8, like we talked about with someone here before, it means that you'll always be balancing, what is the proper use of our power? Don't let one person get more power than the other. And that's quite a learning journey right there. And if you're under the 8 pinnacle, as Mary Ellen is, it means that it's a time in your life where finally you get to focus on empowering yourself and also your financial power, getting that in order, getting your emotional power in order, meaning you don't blame anybody else in your life. You really take responsibility for yourself. And that is a beautiful pinnacle to be under, because everything you do can really turn to gold in that way. And then if you're in an 8 personal year, it means it will be a year where money is on the table. It's a topic of conversation. And if you address it and do work that is powerful and in alignment with your soul, it can be a year that you're very financially successful. So I think we've talked about the pinnacle, the personal year, the soul agree. Yeah. So 9 is, think of the most enlightened, evolved people that you've ever heard about, who started huge nonprofits and really traveled around the world, feeding the hungry or something. And they also had artistic talent. That's very 9 path. And the 9 path soul will often choose to be a therapist or a doctor, a physician, because they need to go to bed every night feeling that they've made a difference. It's like their soul knows that it's kind of a culmination of all their lessons in this lifetime, a final lifetime perhaps. And so they really want to do good and meaningful work in the world. And if they're off path, all they're doing is focusing on their past and who did what to them and how disappointed they are in people and all of that negative focus. But flip it to the other side and they realize that they're the teacher in the room, the highly evolved soul, and they work to make a difference. And if you're under a 9 pentacle, it definitely means it would be a very powerful phase of your life for running a nonprofit or doing healing work, something very meaningful like that. And it also means that if you have a 9 soul agreement number, for example, it would mean that you probably will adore each other, but it's not going to stick. That's the only funny way I can put it. It probably won't be the person that you marry and spend 100 years with, but it will be somebody who makes a huge impact on your life and changes you for the better. 9 pentacle, nine personal year, we know is the end of a cycle. So it's about accomplishment and surrender. Get ready for the next. So the 11 is such a beautiful energy. So today I had a triple 11 master soul client, meaning the 11 lined up all 3 ways you add it. So super sensitive, so intuitive, so aware. But also all of that sensitivity can be very painful. I mean, just last week I was working with a mom whose child had crossed over early, and he had been a triple 11 master soul, so sensitive and just couldn't stay in this unevolved world for very long. And also the downside of the 11 can be that you're so sensitive that you just kind of go into the basement of your house and shut it all down and play video games. I mean, I'm making that up in a way, but not really, because there are a lot of guys, especially, who feel so wounded by the world. And so they go and kind of shut off their life and isolate themselves. And if you look at their path, often they are 11 path, highly sensitive souls, and they just can't figure out how to get by in this very tough world. And it makes total sense to me. If you're a 22, you did come here to make a difference with your work and your ideas, and you're not going to feel at peace until you feel that you've accomplished a lot. But on the downside, you can get very lost in the drudgery, or you can even be a bully with your power, with your charisma. It's funny, I have a wonderful friend here I love so much, and she calls me an overachiever. And because, I always think I'm not doing enough, but then it turns out, wow, I brought the biggest cheese board to the party and it's going to feed everybody. And the whole time I was thinking it wasn't good enough and it wasn't enough, And so people will call a 22 person an overachiever, but in their head, they're thinking, I haven't done enough. I've got another book in me. What am I going to do next? I just haven't accomplished everything. So when you think you know somebody who's an overachiever, I can almost guarantee inside of their head, they are saying, I haven't done enough. And then a 33, let's just think about Jesus Christ as the perfect example of a 33, highly clairvoyant, talking to God, talking to spirit, realizing how humans need to heal and evolve, able to heal people with energy, with touch. And the downside, feeling disconnected from others because your vibration is so much higher than everyone else's that half the time people don't understand what you're saying or teaching. And if you're a modern day 33, if anyone gives you a drug to try and you suddenly realize it makes you feel connected to others and not so different, it can really take you down a wrong path because you're so sensitive and so disconnected from physical world that drugs and alcohol can be particularly dangerous for you. So I think I didn't talk about, is that it, guys, or is there something else I need to add? Okay. Guess we'll go with that. Oh, I wanted to ask you all a question, play a little game here. Now that we've talked about the meaning of numbers, the master soul numbers, the 3 ways you add it, how the sun signs connect to the path and how that influences you. I found a good example of this today, and I'll just throw it in. My sister is a Taurus 22-4, and I'm a Virgo 22-4. A Virgo 24 is more concerned about doing work that is about ideas, writing books, etc. A Taurus 22-4 is a home builder, a home remodeler, very physical, earthy work and accomplishments. And today was a perfect example. My sister was texting me, telling me, oh, it's a great day. I got the new window put into the house that we're remodeling, and we have a new tenant that we're going to put in here. And so we're putting a granite. And she was so excited about all this building and physical stuff they're doing. And I could never do that in my wildest dreams. And I admire her for having the physical endurance to be doing that in her late 60s. And yet she looks at me and sends me a text and goes, my God, Sue, you just made a whole course for humanities team. How do you do that? And I'm going, God, I'd rather do that any day than build a house, So that's kind of how our astrology affects our path in a simplified way of explaining it. So
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm born the 20th of May.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a really close girlfriend who's the 21st of May. When you're on the cusp of 2, does that make a difference in your life?
I don't work with cusp. I said
Okay.
that early on when we were talking about the sun signs. Let me get to their dates here. So what did you say your birthday is? May 20?
May 20.
Yeah, so I would call you a Taurus, even though you would acknowledge that in you, that Taurus is not as intense as it would be if your birthday were, for example, May 1st, as my sister's is. And so she's right kind of in the middle of that Taurus. You're more on the end of it, less of that earthy energy and a little bit moving into the mental energy of Gemini. And then she, your girlfriend, is in the beginning of that very mental, cerebral energy of the Gemini coming out of the Taurus. So we can kind of think of it as a wave, but I really do draw a cut and blank. If I'm doing a chart for somebody and their birthday is May 20th, I'm calling them a Taurus and working with it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to test you all, unless you have a question for me. So I'm going to put the question out there, and then whoever wants to immediately unmute yourself and answer it is the winner, whoever gets to it first. Let me take a pause. How do you add the birth date 3 ways? Who can explain that in a simplified way?
I could give it a quick try if nobody else.
Go for it, Hilda.
I think one is in the linear way, where you take each single number from your birthday to from your birth month, birthday, and the year, and you get the, and then you reduce it to a single digit.
Yep.
The second way is to do it stacked way, like basically I did all 3 ways. That's how I remember it. So you put the month, and then underneath you put the day, and underneath you put the line up the birth date, and then you add them up that way, and then bring it to a single digit.
Beautifully said.
And then the third way that you had said that we had to do it was kind of like stacked again, but what you do is you add them up separately and then add the totals and then reduce it to a single digit.
That was so beautifully explained and absolutely perfectly right. Well done. You get an A+. And why do we need or want to add it 3 different ways? Who would like to answer that?
Be sure.
Sharon?
Oh, to be sure, to validate it all three ways.
Well, that's
I
not the only reason.
Oh,
think
okay.
you want to make sure that you don't have the master numbers like the 33, the 22, and the 11, right? Because
Exactly.
on
Right.
one of
Okay.
Because if you're on the master soul journey and you, where did we talk about this here?
Okay.
If you're a master soul number, your final digit will be the 2, the 4, or the 6. But unless you add it 3 ways, you don't know if it's an 11-2, a 22-4, or a 33-6 in there. And that's very significant difference that you do need to know about. The other reason is just like, I can't remember whose question it was tonight, where she said she was a 16/7. Again, we kind of took a vibration from the 1 and the 6 as it has to do with her 7 path. So the reason I add every birth date 3 ways, even if I already know at the beginning it's not a 2, 4, or 6, is that I'm picking up a vibration of the double digit as it adds up to the single digit that helps me even know who that soul is in a deeper way.
Well, Sue, let me ask you a question. My grandson, he's 27, so he's not little. My daughter got pregnant at 19, and I told her that if she didn't want to have an abortion, I would help her raise him. And I have a lot. He gives me a lot of his life. And so I did his numbers and mine, and I'm a 1, and he's a 22/4.
Wow.
And the minute I looked at that child when he was born, I knew he was an old soul.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. The minute I saw him, the first minute I saw him in the hospital, I go, "You're an old soul, and I don't
That's
know what
right.
this is all about." Now,
That's
when
so
you're trying to
good.
figure, when you're trying to, yeah, and you know, she didn't want to have one, but she couldn't raise him by herself, and he's closer to me than my children are. And I mean, you know, partly because I was, you know, later I was old when I was helping raise him. Okay, so how do I figure? Is our soul agreement just a 1? I'm a 1, so is it just a 1 plus a 4, and it's a 5, or how does that 22 add into the soul agreement?
So, if you add, wait, I always need to work with pen and paper. Give me,
Oh,
give me
okay, I'm a 1.
You're a 1, and your nephew, I mean, your grandson is
a 20, it's a 4, but it's made up of 22. It's a
Yeah.
22. 2 plus 2 is 4. Yeah.
So I would just, you know, I would first just add the 1 and the 4, and I get 5. And then just for curiosity, I might add whatever double digit is before your 1. It could be a 10 or whatever to the 22, just for vibrational learning. And I would say,
okay.
they have a 32/5 soul agreement there. And
I
just,
see.
you know, but the thing is, you don't have to be worried about the details of all this. What you can tell is if you're the 1 and he's the 4, your energy of the 5 means you guys should travel together, have adventures together. It should be a very passionate and fun relationship, and not just sit around having talks and being conversational together, because it's more about a relationship that flourishes in the doing, in the action, in the physical adventure of life.
No, it is. My husband died when he was, I think, maybe 13 or something. But anyway, he lived with me from the 8th grade through high school. And so I would come in, and, you know, I was a widow, and I'd want to go out to dinner, and rather than calling a friend, I'd say, "Hey, Austin, you want to go to Ollie's Garden tonight?" "Oh, yeah." So
See, that's
I had my dinner
perfect.
partner. I had my dinner partner. I didn't have to worry about calling somebody.
That's so great. I mean, we all want that. If we're ever alone, we want somebody in our life that we can go out into the world with and have fun.
Right.
It's perfect.
Yeah, he's fun. We have fun with him, and my daughter, and she and I and him together have a lot of fun together. So
Aww, that's so good.
She's a 6, so.
Well, you did good helping raise that beautiful child.
Oh, he is beautiful.
So I have a question about name numbers, because I know we didn't spend a lot of time on that, but the question for the group would be, let me get to the page here. what can you learn by adding your name number together? What are the three? I shouldn't put this on the screen because then you don't have to think about it. But
Right.
anybody want to summarize and explain to me what you learned from the name number?
I'm a little confused about the name number, Sue, because I
Mhm.
did,
Me too.
but then I think most of us as women, the women, not the men, but we kind of change our names throughout our life. So I've literally, and because I've been married twice, now I have a third one too. So
Mhm.
I kind of my birth name and last name first, and I did my first last name that I took from my first husband with my
Mhm.
first, and then I did my name and last name now that I have with my husband. So I kind of got obviously different numbers for all of them. So
As you feel into those different name vibrations that you have, which one has numbers that feel better to you or feels like a better vibration? Because if I look at my birth name and look at the numbers of that and compare it to the name that I got when I married Paul Frederick, which is Sue Frederick, the vibration is so much different and the numbers are so much better in alignment with me in the Sue Frederick name. So all you have to think about with the name is it's not changing what you've come to this lifetime to accomplish or who you are in your core, but it is maybe changing how the world reads you and picks up your vibration.
I see.
So, for example, if an author changes their name, this has always been so fascinating to me when people decide to be an actor, like Cary Grant, for example. Does anybody remember what his dorky real birth name was? I can't remember it right now off the top of my head, but it was certainly not Cary Grant, you know? And when he was becoming an actor, the studio, I think, gave him that name, Cary Grant. But vibrationally, they kind of knew what they were doing, even if they didn't know what they were doing, because Cary Grant carries this fun sort of sparky energy to it. It'd be fascinating to do the numbers of his name, his original name, and his Cary Grant name. And then you can really see how there was a whole different vibrational shift in the way the world read him once he was Cary Grant.
Hey, Sue,
Yeah.
I'm Carrie, and my son in heaven is Grant.
Oh, that's great.
And at the Helping Parents Heal conference, I'm blanking on his name, from Scotland, Gordon.
Yes, Gordon.
Gordon said, like, called us out, and he had Grant, and he said, "Why am I seeing Cary Grant?"
Oh, I remember that. I was in the room for that. Oh my
So,
God, that was you.
so thank you for that
Yes,
big hello
so
from
now
Grant.
we're thanking Grant right now because obviously he came in and said, I need to tell my mom that I'm here. So let's get Cary Grant to pop into Sue's head and she'll mention it. So thank you, Grant, because
Yes,
that
thank you,
gives your
Grant.
mom, yeah, it gives your mom a little nod there. That's so great. God, that's so funny, Carrie. I remember that happening in the room. Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Remember,
it is really cool.
I was there too. I remember that. It was so did that. That's amazing.
Isn't it amazing? And I did it just tonight. Like I had no intention of talking about Cary Grant, but suddenly as I'm talking about names, his name pops into my head. And now we know that that was a little nudge from Grant. So, God,
Speaking of which, I was going to ask, when you went over the 9 relationship, you talked more about like a couple. So if that is your soul agreement with your child
in spirit, that, that is so common, Carrie. I just can't even tell you how many parents I've done their soul agreement with their departed child, and it's the number 9, because that loss of child is the ultimate culmination of the lesson of surrender. It's when we learn that there's nothing here that we really control. It's that ultimate lesson of surrendering to the bigger picture of divine order here when we lose a child. And so it's no surprise to me that often the soul agreement between mom and child is the number 9.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah. It should be comforting because, again, it takes away any sense that either of you did anything wrong. It was part of the life plan.
That's very cool. Thank you.
One of my clients said, I can't even remember who it was. She was telling me the story and she said, once, oh no, you guys need to go listen to my Mystical Conversation podcast with Beth and Rick Olson. If you just go to my website, SueFrederick.com, you can see my podcast on the bottom of the homepage and just click on the one with Beth and Rick Olson. They are parents who 20 years ago, they were in a car accident. A drunk driver on a Saturday afternoon slammed into them and killed their 2 young children in the back of the car. I think they were like 7 and 9 years old or something like that. And so Beth and Rick are now, all these years later, they're shamans and teachers and healers, and they've been through an amazing spiritual journey. But Beth was telling the story in the podcast of the night after they got back from the hospital, came home into their house. Both of their children were departed. It had been a shock. It happened on a Saturday afternoon when they were going out to do errands with the family. And Beth said they got in bed and it was minute by minute if she could live. She just was telling her husband, I don't think I can live. And her husband said, can you take a breath? And she said yes. And they basically just got through the first few days like that. But she said one of the big awakenings for her was the reality that she had always told herself that she was in control of things here and that she could make things happen. And that's the great illusion of human life, is that we have total control over it. But the bigger realization you have when you have a devastating loss is, no, there is a life plan here that we set up that says we needed to grow and evolve and help others evolve. And when Rick and Beth tell their story, it's so clear the thousands, if not millions of people they have helped since the crossing of their children by the work they do, the talks they give, the books they write. It's extraordinary. And Beth says that realizing that you're really not in control here and your job is to surrender to grace, to love, and to be in the moment, breath by breath. That is the greatest spiritual lesson. And that's what a parent learns the minute they lose a child. So bravo to all of you, because you're the most evolved souls on the planet. So we have a little more time if you have any more questions or comments or anything.
Sue, I have one more question if I can, a quick one. So the numbers we could apply the number method to any kind of, like if it was an address of a home or an address where we live, like, do that.
And that's so fun and so fascinating, because every house I've ever lived in, when I'd go and look at it, I would quickly add the numbers up. But because of the way life is, you can't always control what the number is going to be on the house. So it's more like saying, okay, I surrender, knowing that the lesson, the main vibration I'll be under while I'm living in this house is this particular number. And then by the time you move out of that house and you think back on it, it's always very clear, yes, that house held a vibration of the 11, and in that house, I had my baby girl and there was love, and on and on and on. And And then you can also see the downside, your hypersensitivity that happened perhaps in that house with the vibration of the 11. So it is really fascinating. And I remember when.
Can I interrupt and
Yes.
ask, when you're
Yes.
doing the house number, are
Mhm.
you just looking at the number of the house, or are you doing the street name and the directional
I
also?
see you can really get into the detail of this. I do not allow myself to get into that kind of detail with it because it really can be crazy making. And I think you can pick up enough by just getting the house number and adding that up. And I've also added up cities. This is very fascinating. If you do the digits in the number of a city, for example, the vibration of Scottsdale versus the vibration of Cave Creek or versus the vibration of Prescott, the vibrations of those cities are so different, and you can really see it in the numerology. In fact, Jean and I had this conversation just a few weeks ago where I said, I have to move to either Cave Creek or Prescott because those numbers, and I don't remember what they are now, but I said to him, those are the numbers I'm most at home with and most peaceful with, but it's not Scottsdale, and he was like, okay, well, we'll see if we can afford to downsize to Cave Creek or Prescott. But it's very fun to take that, but just never let it ever turn into a superstition. That's what I want to caution you. Some people, I used to train numerology intuitive coaches for years and years, trained hundreds of people all around the world. And I kind of let it go because I really felt that a lot of times people lost the bigger understanding that the numbers are just trying to help us remember that we're souls on a journey, that there are signs here to help us know how to move through our cycles of reinvention, to remember our soul mission, to understand our relationships, but not to get down in the nitty gritty and feel like, oh, I can't do anything today. It's a such and such vibrational day. And I've got friends and former students who were like that, who would just get so down into that detail of numbers that you could really call it superstition. And whenever something starts to be fear-based or cautionary like that, it is not holding the truth. It is not the soul. And actually, I put numerology away at a certain point in my journey a long time ago, because I knew people and I saw how sometimes it was used in a negative way, and I didn't want to ever do that. And now that I've worked with it all so long, I can say there is no number, good or bad. Everything is simply an energy flow, and it's giving us information about the lessons that we're evolving with, all for highest good. But you can also have fun with it. Just don't ever let it make you afraid of anything.
But Sue, when you say that, sorry, can I just say something? When you say that, when I did 2 of the homes that I've always only lived in my adult life, and those 2 homes belong to me personally, both of the numbers that I added up, they were 6s. Both homes have been the number 6, right? So,
which is the number of home and heart and hearth. I mean, it's a perfect number for you and the home.
Right. But then what has happened is both of the homes, the first one I left because I got a divorce. After my divorce, I left that home. And this home now I'm leaving after my son passed away.
Or we can look at it in a different way, and we can say the lesson of love and opening your heart is profound and sometimes painful. And you were brave and strong as a soul to experience that growth of heartbreak twice in your life. And it wasn't caused by a house. It was simply a sign from heaven that, yes, this is the lesson in the vibration, and you have done it beautifully. And so it is.
So you wouldn't stop you. You wouldn't let it stop.
That is superstition.
Okay. Got you.
These are good questions. I'm really glad you guys are asking this.
So I have a question. It's Jennifer.
Yeah.
I don't know if this relates to numerology at all, but there's certain well, there is always a number that I see a lot, like
Mhm.
during my day and stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering if that means anything.
What is the number?
33.
Oh, well, of
And
course
it's
that means
also because my mom was born in 1933 and she just passed a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
And she died on the 21st of February. And so I see
Mhm.
like 21's another number that comes up a lot for me, but I always see the number 33. So I always
Mhm.
just, and I saw it before she passed. So I always
Mhm.
like to think, oh, maybe it's a little hello from mom, but I
Yeah,
don't
I
know
mean,
if that's.
anytime we see a 33, we are getting a sign from spirit, a sign from God, and we are being kind of reminded that there's a higher purpose here, a higher vision. And I want to make it clear that there's nothing ever superstitious about all of this. So you have to be very careful as you think about it, because some people will come to me and say, you know, I'm seeing 11s everywhere. Like, is that good or bad? And the answer is neither. It is just reminding you to look up to spirit and remember that you are getting nudges from God, from your departed loved ones, from your spirit guides, helping you remember that you have a higher purpose here.
Thank you.
Sometimes we wake up in the middle of the night at the same time every night. I do. And when Paul died, every night for months, I would wake up at 2:22 in the morning. And I didn't know what that meant for a long time, but I know two things about it is that the veil is very thin around 2 in the morning and 3 in the morning. And if you're going to have a visit from spirit, it's often during those times. And the fact that I was on the 22 path and that Paul's death, his first visit for me was in 2:22 in the morning after he had passed that day. It's all about reminding me that I have work to do and that I'm supposed to be learning a higher lesson from the loss of my husband. And back then, you know, I was struggling with what was the purpose and the meaning of everything. So to be waking up every morning at 2:22 a.m. and look at that clock, now I know God and Paul and everybody was going, wake up, Sue, you have work to do. The 22 and also the 6, 222 adds up to 6, which means, and it's all about love. So. All right, so let's pray out. And unless there's a final question anybody needs to ask before we go, I'm going to pray us out. And I want to really send gratitude, love, and thankfulness to all of you. These questions are wonderful. The numbers are your guides to remembering that you came here on purpose. You have a life plan for your highest good and growth and everyone's around you growth. And there's no bad or wrong numbers. Everything is just a loving message, a loving sign to remind us that we are divine beings who came here on purpose, and that when we leave this physical world, we lift into spirit, which is our perfect home, and it's our happiness is in when we're in the divine realms, and our departed loved ones are trying to show us that they're so happy and so present. And on that note, we take a deep breath and we thank the spirits of our departed, like Grant for showing up tonight, as we talked about Cary Grant, and any other spirits of departed loved ones who were here nudging their beloveds during class, giving them little signs, showing them things in the numbers. We send love and gratitude, and we ask that our guides and our departeds and God always teach us exactly what we need to learn to become our greatest self. And so it is. Thank you all so much. Love you. I'll send you the recording.
Thank you,
Thank
Sue.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.
Good night.